everybody. Welcome to Slam, the podcast that reviews every single DC superhero ever created. I'm your co-host, Mike Allen, as always, I'm joined by
Joshua Mervell, and today we're going to be taking a look at some of the origins for the DC Comics character Wildcat.
Yes! So my first question, Josh, had you ever heard of Wildcat before this week?
So I had heard of him. I didn't know too much. I feel like we've also come across him a couple of times already just in this podcast alone. And I had seen him in like random appearances, but I've never read like a Wildcat story, I don't think. He's always just kind of been in the background doing stuff. Right. So it was interesting to see. I think that the costume is real goofy, but it kind of has like a weird charm to it as well. I don't know why. I don't hate it, even though it's absolutely like insane. I don't know. I think it's just because it's like, I think I just love the juxtaposition of like this giant hulking like beefcake of a man, and he's got these little whiskers coming off his face.
Good
like I don't know why. I think that's why I like it, because it's almost absurd in the right direction for me. I think it weirdly works, and I think that in like an updated version of this character, it could be really fun, and like it can be played like tongue-in-cheek. Like everybody thinks it's ridiculous that this guy is dressed that way, right? So I don't know. Well,
okay, I'll just say I first came across the second Wildcat, well, maybe the first one, but in Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then in the same series, Yolanda Montez. And then, then he was kind of around in the 90s, but then he started popping up in the Justice Society revival. He was also in Arrow. I guess he was in Stargo, which I haven't seen. And then the animated versions were in Justice League, Unlimited, and Brave and the Bold. I don't know. I think the original version is just one of those characters. In my opinion, he's really hard to put into the modern day unless you were to radically change that costume, because it is to me a very golden age-ish costume,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And like, I'll just it's the mask. You're right. It's the mask that does it. And they could do a new version, but they'd have to change that. But I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Now, the other thing too, long-time listeners will know one of my pet peeves about superheroes is when they have an identity, a non-powered identity like Wildcat or whatever it may be. And then later, or say, I can't think of another one right now, but then later on, another one is Marvel's Tigra or Hellcat.
Okay.
They take on an identity with just spandex and no costume, and then later on, they accidentally get
Black Cat
that match their exact
right.
They didn't get ice control powers.
Yeah.
They got feline powers. What a coincidence, right? So this is one of those where not these versions of Wildcat, but like Wildcat 3 or 4, one of them ended up being a metahuman that could change into a werepanther. Get out of here. Anyway, I prefer this more, these old versions, but we'll just leave it at that. But so we're actually going to start with Sensation Comics #1, which was also the first appearance of Wonder Woman.
Right.
And Mr. Terrific. And Josh, you're going to tell us what happens in Sensation #1.
Yeah. So this kind of cover, we get a splash page of Wildcat in his costume. We get like a little bit of like a recap of who he is. And then we're kind of like introduced to the fact that we're going to be telling the origin of his story here. So this version of Wildcat is named Ted Grant. He's an amazing fighter. He's also extremely smart, but unfortunately his parents pass away. I think specifically they talk about his dad, and the insurance from his father's death is only enough to cover like the funeral expenses and then whatever like debt his dad was in. So that leaves him kind of homeless, walking around the city. He's really hungry. And one day he stumbles on a crime that's happening, and he steps in and he fights these guys. And of course, a famous boxing coach sees this and tells him, hey, you'd make a great fighter one day. So
Mm-hmm.
he takes him in under his wing, and he becomes this like amazing boxer. And then we kind of get a hint of like one of the fight managers hints that like, hey, maybe I'll rig the fight so he wins. That way we can make some money. If we bet against him, like against the other guy, then we'll be golden.
Mm-hmm.
And Ted's like, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not. I can beat him fair and square. Just put me up against whoever you want, and still bet on me, and I'll win. So we kind of get like another little montage of him meeting this woman, and it's like this his opponent's girlfriend, and later on with this big fight coming up, the announcer like says on the radio that like promoting the fight, saying that this is like a personal fight because Ted is in love with this woman. And Ted's like, I didn't say that. What the hell's going on? And it turns out that
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to build this fight to be like really personal, to build up sales and whatnot. And the two fight promoters decide to they're still going to try and like rig the fight for Ted to
Mm-hmm.
win. So the night of the fight, they're fighting, and Ted gives him one last blow, and sucker drops him. He falls to the ground, and the bell rings, and he wins. And then they go over to his opponent, and it turns out that he is actually dead. And we find out that there is a needle in his glove with poison. And we find out that these guys accidentally put too much poison into the needle that they snuck into Ted's glove, and they killed him on accident. So after the trial, he's sent to jail, and when he's being driven to prison, a car crashes into them, and the police cruiser goes off the side of a cliff, and there's this horrible crash, and it turns out that it's these guys setting it up so Ted doesn't spill the beans on what really happened. They're kind of taking care of him for good, but he survives. And as he's walking down the street trying to go home, he runs into this kid who's reading a comic book. He's reading like he lost his Green Lantern comic, and he's like, "Hey, what's a superhero, kid?" He's like, "Oh, they're great." Yeah. So he teaches him about superheroes, and that gives him the idea to don this secret identity, the Wildcat. So he goes up to these promoters, and he kind of like knocks some sense into them, and he essentially like scares them into printing, like telling the truth to like a news outlet about what really happened. And then in like real quickly, it's wrapped up. Ted Grant reveals that he didn't die, and that he was, under the Wildcat's protection, and the Wildcat told him to lay low. And he's able to walk free and box again. It's like real quickly wrapped up here at the end. So,
Right.
it's a. I like the idea of like the boxer. I like the idea of the setup. What I think is like kind of dry and derivative for comics, especially at this point. Like I know a lot of the heroes that we're talking about. These concepts might seem old to us because they've been around for so long, but at the time a lot of these ideas were kind of fresh and new with the origins. But I feel like now at this point even this kind of feels a little bit
like
played out, like
formulaic.
like, oh, he died and he just decides to be a superhero to get back at the bad, you know what I mean? It's just like, okay. And then him just like walking back here at the end to be like, I actually didn't die, the Wildcat saved me. But it's like, okay, I don't know, it's just a little too convenient. Where did he get the idea to even dress up as a giant black bobcat? Like I just am not I don't know, I'm not 100% convinced on the secret identity part of the superhero thing. I'm more invested in Ted Grant than I am Wildcat from this story.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I actually thought the plot was fairly interesting and fairly complex. So this is written by Bill Finger, who created Batman or co-created him, depending who you ask. He's a very well-respected writer from this time, and I think the plot was pretty good. There was some unnecessary twists, like I don't know, the whole thing about lying about being in love with the girl, and then certain other little things. Like they could have streamlined it a little bit,
Mhm.
but other than that, I thought it was actually a story. I think that was good.
Yeah.
But my least favorite was the whole, you know, you know, in real life, he's got a job doing something else. Nobody knows he's the Lantern. That little scene where he's talking to the
Right. Yeah,
kid.
the kid. Yeah.
Yeah, my least favorite part. And then you're right. It's like all of a sudden he's like, "Oh, great idea!" And then he just dresses up as in this ridiculous costume. Whatever. It's par for the course. But you're right. It's like it. Maybe they could have just rethought it a little bit. But just like, I mean, we should point out this was a Sensation was, I think, a quarterly book, but in this one issue, we've got the second appearance of Wonder Woman, the first appearance of Mr. Terrific, the first appearance of Wildcat, as well as the first appearance of the Gay Ghost and Little Boy Blue.
Hmm.
So they were probably just like the editor was probably like, give me as much as you got. We need 5 new characters this week. You know what I mean? And they
Right.
just pumped them out.
Yeah.
But I mean, Wildcat did go on to join the Justice Society, and he appeared in Sensation. Let me just double check this here. Hold on a sec. It's too late. No, can't. Don't have time. I don't know how long he appeared, but it was for a few years. But again, he disappeared when they did the revivals in the 50s and 60s. He was not rebooted. He was eventually brought back, and in one of those confusing team ups with Batman, where the Earth One Batman teamed up with Wildcat. But then everyone was like, but Wildcat's from the 40s, so he's on our Earth 2. So then they were like, oh, this is actually the Earth 1 Wildcat. But then they just didn't
Scrapped
bother.
it.
Yeah,
Right.
like, well, whatever. And then obviously he made it to Crisis, which we'll, talk about in coming weeks. But very tied to the Golden Age. And like I said earlier, unless they change the costume or do something with his powers, there's not really much hope for this character, I don't think, unless they just want to do it's like if you're going to do street level, he can't be dressed like this freaking Halloween character. You know what I mean?
Right.
So that's actually why in the Arrowverse, he didn't have a cat mask. He just had like a black, almost like a ski mask type thing,
Right.
So, but yeah, a good character, but judging by the fact that we're almost at the end of the roster for Justice Society, I think they were kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel by this point.
Yeah, unfortunately, because I really do like the boxing origin. I think that's a really fun tie-in,
Right?
And it gives him like an excuse to have like the power set he has, like being an expert at fighting, like that, and then like rolling that into crime fighting. I really love that, and then like you can have so many stories with him like on a street level. His boxing gym is in a bad neighborhood. He's cleaning up the streets. Like, I feel like it could be really fun. But yeah, I'm just not fully convinced on the superhero origin part of this origin. Everything else for me works.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. That's the end of Ted Grant. As I said, Ted Grant was not rebooted, but then in the Crisis, which we'll cover eventually, I think his legs were crushed in like some kind of super villain battle. And then in the story we're about to read, we do not actually see Yolanda Montez
right
don the costume, because that happens in Crisis number 6. But we are introduced to Yolanda Montez in this story, which is her first appearance, and that's in Infinity Incorporated number 12. And since Josh didn't even know who the hell she was,
yeah, I was very confused. I'm like, so did Mike send me the wrong comic to read? I was a little, yeah.
Here's the problem: is as I've said on this show, I'll just pick the origin or the first appearance of the character, and then you won't see everything, or you won't see them in costume. And so for this one, I actually went through several different possibilities, but by the time I got to like a full length story, it was like a year in. I'm like, oh, forget it.
Oh,
I'll just pick this one. And so I'll get to it when we get to it. But yes, she is in this story. Okay.
interesting.
So yeah. Okay. So here we go. This is Infinity Incorporated number 12. And the first thing is I actually thought it would be Todd McFarlane art, but this is, I guess, before McFarlane became artist, because it's Don Newton, who's actually a really, really respected artist. I don't think this is his best work, maybe because of the inks, but it's pretty good. You know, it's classic Bronze Age art. So we open up with Green Lantern's children, Obsidian and Jade, on the phone with, is that Green Lantern? I don't even remember.
No, I can't remember his name.
I mean, we're looking at the page, but we could read it, but we're not going to. Yeah, we can't remember. It's let's see, who is it? Oh, Silver Scarab.
Scarab, okay.
Silver Scarab, which is the son of Hawkman and Hawkwoman.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So anyway, we also have to remind everyone that Roy Thomas scripts are excessively wordy, but also excessively like confusing and all over the place. And there's not that much going on. There's just a lot of talking, I find. But anyway, so they reminded him that he's got a press conference to do. We cut over to kind of like a bunch of people gathering together for this thing, and we see like a kind of like limousines pulling up. We see Huntress, Star Spangled Kid, and Power Girl. And earlier I had said that Don Newton is a good artist, but that's a really sloppy intro to these characters. It feels like a really amateur looking image. What do you think?
Yeah, it's very rushed. There's way too much going on, and I get that it's supposed to be busy and like a huge event, but I am getting lost in what we're following and who, like, really what's going on. I think it doesn't help that we're constantly changing angles of this event when there's so much going on and it's like really flashy. Like, we're getting this bird's eye, or like this establishing shot, which is fine, but then we're seeing like the car's POV almost of the red carpet, and then we see it from the front angle, and then we start seeing it from the side angle, and it's just like I'm trying to follow what the characters are doing while also seeing all of these other like background characters like taking over the focus of what's happening.
And the thing is in this particular page, we see Huntress getting out of the car. And the next panel, the three characters are kind of in the midground. What is that in the background? Like, it's the car.
The car and then nothing.
But it's like, the white of the nothing mixes in with the white of the car. And it's just, that's a combination of the colorist making a mistake, I think, but also the art. And we should point out that Don Newton died soon after this, so maybe he was in ill health, and I don't want to judge him, but yeah, this is pretty rough, pretty sloppy.
Yeah, I mean, even down to like the Star Spangled Kid in the corner being on like the opposite side as the reporter. Like, I don't know, it just like it weirdly bounces around a lot, and I feel like it's not as cohesive as we're like going through. But
yep. And then I have a certain affinity for like indie press 80s comics that with this type of like art, but like when we now we cut away again to a different scene, and it's a brief 2-panel scene of, I think that's the Ultra Humanite, and I don't know who else watching it on the TV, but again, it's a little bit confusing. We don't know quite where they are, why they're there, but okay, fine. Then we cut back to the press conference. We see them walking in. We see other fans. And then from above, we see Northwind flying down. And this is what's confusing, is now Northwind has no blood relation to Hawkman and Hawkwoman, but he's kind of like the successor to them. So he's from like a bird culture society up in the mountains somewhere. Kind of a cool design, but whatever. Kind of hokey. Then we see this is Nuklon. Yeah, I can't remember. I think he's
Nuklon, related
to the Atom. Yeah. You just gotta go with it or you don't, whatever, right? And then you see like Jade and Obsidian getting out of the car. Then we cut over to now Fury joins. Fury is the daughter of the Golden Age Wonder Woman, and I gotta say, I love her costume. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Pretty freaking
Yeah.
cool, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, it is strange. We're like, I am not familiar with most of these characters,
Right.
if I'm
right.
being honest. And we're being introduced to them so quickly and without like a real proper introduction on messy full pages. And I was just lost for most of it. And then while this is happening, we're also like cutting back to their like lineage and how they're connected to the other characters. And I'm just like, it's just way too much.
Yep. And then we're also cutting away, like we cut away again to people watching them on TV. Then on this page that you're on, we cut away to, it looks like Carter Hall and I think Alan Scott, you know, the original Green Lantern, the original Starman. They're all watching on TV. And then now we get to this big double page spread on the next page of the actual press conference. To kind of sitting down. And I guess this is the title of the story, press conference. And, you know, even this image here, it's not great. You know, I don't know.
No.
Of them kind of all just lining up. It's not great. It's okay, but it's not great. Oh, and I guess we should point out, oh, you know what? This explains a lot. The first 3 pages were by Don Newton and Joe Rubinstein, and then the rest was Tim Burgard and Tony DeZuniga. So, and again, Tim Burgard, I have never heard of him before. So he must have taken over maybe right after Don Newton died, maybe, right? I don't know. So anyway, yeah, not great art, but basically we get this press conference, and again, we get, you know, I look at this, you know, Alan Moore's known for being verbose, and so is Chris Claremont. But when I look at their pages, I at least know I'm going to get something. But when I look at a Roy Thomas page and I see all this text, I'm like, I don't want to read this, and I certainly don't want to reread it. And I just read it like last week, and I already forget what was going on. Not much.
Yeah. I also read this a week ago. I should have read it again because I feel like I didn't fully even grasp what happened when I read it the first time. And I don't think that the art helps. The fact too that there's just so much dialogue to get through. I'm not even sure why we're seeing them all from like the back. Like all of these shots of these characters are the back of their heads as they're talking. I'm just like, I'm so confused. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be focusing on.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, that's just. Oh, by the way, Don Newton didn't die during this issue. But anyway, it is just, it's just amateur, right? Like it's just that's the definition of an amateur artist, I think, is they don't know what to focus on, and it's just very poorly done. And like, okay, so on the page that you're on here, we get some, you know, talking heads shots, and just this. Again, you know, I grew up reading All-Star Squadron, and I used to love it as a kid, but I just, I don't know, like we have Star Spangled Kid going around I'd like to introduce you to the charter members of Infinity Incorporated. And then they all have the little quip, you know, like Obsidian, that means black, as in totally. His twin sister Jade, fraternal, not identical. You know, they don't all have like a quip, but they're just, it just drives me nuts because it just seems very kind of half-assed and kind of rushed. You know what I mean? And then they show the other ones, and it's just, I don't know. Then like on the next page, we have Power Girl kissing Star Spangled Kid, and then swooping off. He's like, oh yeah, it's like the typical like, oh yeah, we love you guys, but we're too busy to be part of the team, so we're gonna leave and go to our other comic book that we're in. You know, like just get out. You know what I mean? Like, so then they disappear. And then, you know, they're joking around with people in the audience, and just I don't know. I mean, I appreciate the spirit of what this is, but it's really hard to read and really hard to get through.
Yeah. I almost wished that, like, I think that the gimmick of a press conference is really fun. I think that you could have introduced the characters through questions that the different audience members were asking them. You know, like, wow, Power Girl, how fast can you really fly? Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so now I know who Power Girl is. Now I know who Star Spangled Kid is. Like, for anybody who's unfamiliar, you are And then it's like fun, right? Like you're getting an
You're
introduction
right.
to them, but you're also like getting a bit of their characters. This tells me nothing about who these people are. You know
That's
what
a
I mean?
you
Like it,
that that's a
hello.
great
Like
point.
I don't know. It's nothing. So it's
Y-
kind of wasting the idea of a press conference on nothing. Like,
Well, what you said again, if you had like just have it do a draft two. Like, here's your draft one. Now let's do draft two. Like you said, even before you ask the question, what if we start off with Star Spangled Kid is sitting there alone, and then someone says, "Where's the rest of the Infinity
right?
Incorporated?" And then Power Girl swoops in at the speed of sound or speed of light, and then Huntress swings in on her bat line, and then another character materializes, and another whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then as a kid, you're like, "Oh, that's what they can do. That's what they can do." And you're
Hmm.
right. Then it makes it fun, even if it's not logical. At least it's fun, right?
Yeah.
But you're right. This tells us nothing. It does nothing. It's just filling pages, and adding in all these stupid jokes that are not funny. It's just a big mess. It's the big mess of like
Yeah.
brightly colored, garish crap. And again, so yeah, they're talking back and forth, and then if you could just skip to the next page. Oh yeah, another page, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Okay, then skip to the next page, and this feast your eyes on the next page, actually 15.
Right
This
here.
is the first appearance of Yolanda Montez. This
Gotcha.
is the woman who is destined to be the new Wildcat. So they probably knew that, and that's what they gave her the nice hero shot introducing
Gotcha.
her. And I don't know much about her, but I guess she's a reporter, right?
Mhm.
And then okay, this is an embarrassing little exchange. She's talking to Nuklon, and she's like, "That mohawk, does it mean you're a punker or what?" And he's like, "Punker? Hardly." Okay, I know a little bit about punk and punk rock, but I've never heard anyone called punker. But again, I wasn't. Maybe that's what the term they used in 1982 or whatever this is.
Right.
But it just sounds ridiculous. It sounds like a 40-year-old trying to write for teenagers, right? It's pretty bad.
Oof. Yeah,
Yep.
it's not great.
Uh, and again,
Uh,
I
mhm.
was just gonna say, and we get nothing out of Yolanda Montez, right? No characterization, nothing interesting about her, right?
Yep.
She
That's
just
it.
asks the question, it gets answered, and she's out.
Yep. Yeah.
Doesn't make a very good impression.
Yeah, it doesn't like even tell us who she is. You know what I mean? As a character, like if they are setting this character up to be a new superhero and they know that, why not have her ask questions about being a superhero? Why not ask questions like why not question them on how they're
Right,
being a superhero? That way you can introduce conflict later on. Like there's nothing going on. She's gonna ask about his haircut
right, right,
and then
right.
move on. Like no further questions. Like
Well, and all,
it's just
yeah, or why don't you have her ask a question that makes her seem very clever, or
mhm.
maybe she asks a question and implies something that maybe she shouldn't know about, like, and then maybe they're like, oh, why does she know
Mm,
about that? Or she
yeah.
accuses them of something, or I don't know what, but at least have her do something that makes the reader intrigued enough to be like, oh, I want to know more about her story. I want to see more about her. But no, there's nothing.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, checklist. We just checked off our introduction. We got
Right.
introduction to Yolanda
Yeah.
Montez. It's junk. So then now we have a reporter. Now they're kind of harassing Nuklon.
Hmm.
Uh, see, like now this is actually more interesting. The next reporter is like, why is this guy here when his father was Brainwave, who's a supervillain?
Hmm.
Like at least that's something. And then he attacks the audience, right? And then Jade has to stop him. So that's kind of cool. That's at least
Hmm.
something happening, right? But then basically, so then Jade takes him out of the situation, and then it cuts moments later. And see, again, this is bad storytelling. They just cuts to them like they're in a bathroom somewhere. But it would have been nice to show that how he
Hmm.
got there, how she brought him there. So then
Oops,
they
sorry.
talk, blah blah
Yeah.
blah, crap. Then Obsidian flies back to the press conference, and then now this is not interesting, but this is at least kind of a cool idea. So now they're asking Silver Scarab. They're like, uh, oh, sorry. Another reporter says, I want to know about these hero types, including the fact that the Silver Scarab's real name is Hector Hall. See, that should have been Yolanda Montez or something like that. She should have
Hmm.
done something like
Right. Yeah.
invitational, but instead this guy does. So then this introduces this kind of interesting sequence where he's like, you know what, screw this. He just takes his mask off. He's like, yep, I am Hector Hall. You
Hmm.
know, which is kind of interesting. Oh, by the way, this character is in the Sandman comic book and TV show, Hector Hall.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then it's kind of cool because then the other ones are like, what's her name? Fury. She's like, well, I might as well say hi to my mom and dad, you know. So then and then we cut over to Wonder Woman and Steve Trevor watching.
Hmm.
But she doesn't reveal, they already know her identity, I think, because he says she's already known to be the daughter of Wonder Woman. So that's not a
Hmm.
revelation. But then we cut over to Nuklon and he's like, here's a little something that wasn't even in that script. My real name is Albert Rothstein, and my mother is Mrs. Terry Rothstein of NASA. You know, so now he's revealing his identity too,
Hmm.
right? So at least it's something. And then the next page we see Northwind. My real name is Norda. You know, and while I wish to reveal no more about my homeland at this time, I have really no need of a mask. You know, so it's just something, right?
Right.
And then Jade, she kind of gives a little thing about her powers. Then Obsidian takes off his mask. It's kind of cool. By the way, I actually love the design of these characters, Jade and Obsidian,
Yeah.
all of them. I think they're really
Yeah.
cool. Yeah. And then look at this. This is so stupid. Oh my God! Up in the chandelier. What? Oh look, it's Harlequin, not Harley Quinn, but Harlequin. This is an
Mhm.
actual Golden Age supervillain.
Villain.
And she just shows up on the chandelier. So then of course we have to have a superhero fight, right? So gratuitous fight ensues, right?
Yeah, and it's not even really super exciting. Like none of her powers really do anything. I don't know. She smacks Jade with a ukulele or like a
Yeah.
banjo
Yeah.
for I don't know. It's whatever. I don't know. Uh, you know,
You know,
I don't even think we really see how they defeat her either. They just like off screen.
yeah, see, but then Silver Scarab says, "Oh, she's gone, and it was all an illusion.
Oh,
Even the
that's what
cracks
he
in the
right.
ceiling have vanished." It's just why am I reading this? You know, you know what? And I gotta say, there's gonna be people that watch this podcast. They're like, "You guys are so snobby." I we do read 80s comics that are good.
Yeah,
This is just not one of them. In fact, even the Wildcat origin is better than this, right? Like at
right.
least it had a coherent story, but this is just
Yeah, or like show that it was an illusion. Look, have them
right,
like wonder, oh, what really happened here? What's
right,
going on?
right.
Like, it just feels like nothing. Like
Yeah.
nothing. I guess that they revealed themselves, and that's what changes by the end of it. But
Uh-huh.
it doesn't even feel like the reveal is earned,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's not. It doesn't feel like a big scandal. It doesn't feel like if that's what it is, then maybe that's what the purpose of this press conference is to like deal with the fact that this guy's secret identity was revealed. So then the team comes together, they have a press conference. Listen, that is my secret identity. That is who I am. I hid myself to protect my family, yada yada.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know. It just feels overstuffed, convoluted. We have this weird hologram fight so that there's a fight in the issue, I assume.
Right, right.
I don't know. It
But
is what it is. It's just kind of nothing to me.
it's
Like,
nothing.
unfortunately. And like, it should be something. They revealed their identities. Like, that should be a big deal, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
heroes didn't do that at this
Right.
time, right? Like, it wasn't a common thing. I feel like I don't know. It's just yeah, it's all a little strange.
Yeah. Um, and then the story wraps up, and I gotta say that actually Don Newton did die after the next issue, so
Mm.
he was probably in ill health at this point. I just want to explain why
Hmm.
the first few pages were by him, and then the rest were by different artists. But anyway, so this issue is kind of a mess. It doesn't really accomplish much.
Yeah.
It barely accomplishes introducing Yolanda Montez. So, woo! I mean, I love the idea of Infinity Incorporated. I like the designs of the characters. I like some of the origins, but the actual writing, in my opinion, is pretty brutal.
Yeah, I have not read any of Infinity Incorporated. And I feel like the character costumes and like who they are and who they're connected to are really interesting to me. But this comic doesn't do a great job of making me interested in like the stories or this era of this, this book or this team. So while I am interested to know more and read about these guys, I don't think I would continue reading with like from here. I would look up good stories with these characters and read those ones. You know what I mean? Like I'm not continuing with Infinity Incorporated issue 13.
No.
Yeah, it doesn't do it for me.
And again, this is one of those books where I had maybe 1 or 2 issues when I was younger, and I was always like, I'm going to go back and read the rest. No, I'm not. I'm just not. It's not good.
Right.
The only thing I like about this book is, I said, like the costumes and the colorfulness. And also, this was one of those DC series that was on better paper. So that's the one good thing. The colors are bright. So if you like bright colors, you can read this series. But other than that,
right.
There's no reason to read it.
Yeah.
Oh boy. So now you see an image of Wildcat from a few years later. I honestly did not follow her. I don't know what she did after, the 80s, but unfortunately the original Wildcat tended to overshadow Yolanda Montez, and so even when Wildcat was introduced in, I think it was Batman Brave and the Bold cartoon, he was already like an older like he was an old man, whereas Batman was like his 20s or 30s. So that's, I think, what most people associate with Wildcat, the original Ted Grant version. So that's it. That's Wildcat.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate origin for this version. I think that the original one was pretty solid, especially for those like original origins. Some of them are pretty rough. Like, even Superman's origin was like a little bit weird, the first version of it, right? Sure. Like it's, so I liked it for the most part, and I'm interested to read more about his character. And while this didn't do a great job of getting me interested in this era of Infinity Inc., I will probably go and try and find some good Infinity Inc. story arcs and read through them. So yeah, unfortunately, it's kind of like an off start for Wildcat as as far as origins go. But I think the character has potential to be great, and I'm sure that there's some great Wildcat stories. So
maybe I just don't know about them. But anyway, so that wraps up our Wildcat discussion. Next week, or next episode in 2 weeks, we got a big one. We've got The Batman Part 3. And this is going to be an interesting one because we're not doing origins. We're actually reviewing, I believe it's 5 different versions of the Case of the Chemical Syndicate, which is the first Batman story. And you'll find out why we're doing that. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty cool. So be sure to join us for that. And Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening and watching the podcast. You can find all of our stuff over on our website at thecomicbooksyndicate.com. You can find all of our stuff also on our YouTube channel. Our podcasts are video format, so you can see the comics and pages and stuff as we're talking about them. So go check us out there. Leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about the stuff we're talking about. If you have any recommendations for good Wildcat or Infinity Inc. stories, leave them in the comments. And keep in touch. So until next time.
See you later.
See ya.